The views expressed in this program do not necessarily reflect those of this station.
Welcome to Insights into Northeast Michigan, a WBKB News public affairs program. Insights deals with the issues affecting those in the community, as well as Northeast Michigan and the state. And now, Insights into Northeast Michigan.
Welcome back to this week's episode of Insights. This week we'll be discussing the Oscoda water issue with Chuck LaShawn, the Environmental Health Director of District Number 2. Thanks for being with us, Chuck.
Thank you for having me.
Recently it's come to our attention that the former Wirt Smith Air Force Base had leaked chemicals, not to their knowledge, some sort of firefighting foam that has gotten into the groundwater of a lot of residents of Iosco County. Can you tell us some history on what happened there?
Yeah, sure. A lot of the foams, and mostly this came from the foams from firefighting and exercises that the Air Force performed out there. These foams are actually life-saving foams that are used not only at Air Force bases, but also in commercial. If you're on an airline and you're on a runway and your plane catches on fire, these foams put out fires immediately. They're excellent. They serve a purpose. However, back in the 70s, a lot of the testing wasn't available back then to determine that there were issues with them or could be issues with them and getting into the groundwater. The Wirt Smith Air Force Base is only one of 40 in the U.S. that comes under what they call a BROC program, and 38 out of the 40 also have issues with these perfluorinated chemicals or PFAs, alkalis, into the groundwater. So this is an issue that is not isolated to just Oscoda. It's nationwide. The Air Force is working and dealing with that on a nationwide basis. But back in the 70s when this occurred, they continued to use it, and now we know that it's into the groundwater. It is spreading throughout. These plumes have spread throughout an area north and northeast of the Air Force Base, and now we are having to deal with what to do next with them.
The organizations that are involved, what is their role in all of this?
Well, there are several. We have, of course, the Air Force that I mentioned. As local health department, we're working with the people on alternative water systems, whether they want to get an RO or reverse osmosis, as they call it, onto their drinking water system in the house, or they can get a water cooler. So we work with them in that respect. We do a lot of communication with the residents, send out letters, notifications, and so forth. Department of Environmental Quality in Michigan, they're involved with this. They're involved with sampling, monitoring wells, and so forth. The Air Force is also doing that. And then we have community health. We have people at the community health level who are involved with monitoring this. We have toxicologists and others that are involved with this and that are very active in trying to find a long-term solution.
The water has been referred to as contaminated. How far does the reach go into affecting human health?
Well, it's hard to say. There are lots of studies, but it's still in its infancy in terms of studies on chemicals. A lot of chemicals have not been studied, and this particular one has been studied, but it is, for every study that may show an effect on animals, I might say, not on humans, these are animal studies, there may be other studies that show that there are no effects on the particular organ and within maybe a kidney or liver within the body, because organisms vary in their metabolism. They vary in what affects them and what doesn't. Humans are different than animals, obviously, and even in animal species, you can take 4 different animals, like a rat, a mouse, a guinea pig, and a rabbit, and you can have different effects on each one of them, even on male and female. So it's difficult at this point to determine long-term or chronic effects on humans.
Have the areas of groundwater affected by the contaminants been sort of sectioned off? Do you guys have any idea of what areas are being affected most by this?
Yes, through the monitoring of the groundwater and sampling program, It's been determined that there are several plumes, and plumes are just areas under the ground where the movement of the contaminant has reached. It's gone out as far as Lake Huron. It's affected probably over 300 residences, and we have a pretty good idea where it's at. We're continuing to monitor, however, to see if it's expanding any further than what we currently know.
The water is contaminated in that drinking it may be a risk to human health, but what about other purposes for the water? Can we still swim in it, use it to bathe?
Oh, absolutely. Consuming it's the only precaution that we are extending at this point, and it is a precaution. We don't know, like I said earlier, that what effects and long-term effects it may have. The number that the EPA came out with, 70 parts per trillion, is a very small number. But at this point, swimming in it, using it for other purposes are fine. It's just consuming it.
We have to take a short break, but when we return, we'll talk more about the concerns Chuck has been hearing from residents, as well as the Air Force's response. Stay tuned. Welcome back. I'm still here with Chuck. We're in the Tawas office of District Health Department number 2. Chuck, you've heard from a lot of residents recently regarding this concern. What have you heard most frequently?
Well, understandably, when you have a situation like this, residents, first of all, want knowledge about, as much as possible, what this means to them and to their health. The second thing is, what are long-term and short-term resolutions to this issue? They don't want a Band-Aid fix to it, and I can understand that. We don't either. Municipal water, fortunately, is in that area, and that's been one of the issues that the residents have been bringing up is, can we get municipal water?
If they were to get municipal water, who would pay for it?
It's a good question, and pressure has been put on the Air Force because this is their issue, this is their problem that they have to deal with. It's our problem in terms of local health department and state agencies to deal with it as we can and to try to get it rectified as well. But it's not an inexpensive issue of extending water lines to the public. The question is whether the Air Force will give in to that at some point in the future and extend municipal water, and that's the ultimate goal that we would like to see.
Has the Air Force been receptive to paying any portion of the cost?
Well, they have, and the state has, but it's been limited. We recently just got another $100,000 to replace the filters for the reverse osmosis that people put in their homes last year about this time. So we're getting money through the state, but we need the Air Force to step up at some point, and we're hoping they will, to help extend water lines to the residents, because I think, and I think most people think, that that's going to be the ultimate resolution to this issue.
What are some alternative options for people whose groundwater is contaminated and they don't have that access to municipal water as it is right now?
Well, we have a couple of things that they can do. One is we have water coolers available that Culligan will provide for them. And then we have the reverse osmosis unit that's hooked up to their sink, so they can use that for drinking water purposes, because consumption, once again, is the main issue here. And so if they have the water cooler or the RO, as they call reverse osmosis, that's the interim measure that they can go with right now. And most people are choosing the reverse osmosis. It's about a 4-to-1 right now, 4 reverse osmosis to every person with a water cooler.
With an issue like this, keeping informed is so important. People hear water crisis and they immediately freak out. They think Flint water crisis. How can residents best keep informed about this issue so that they know what's happening?
Well, we have community meetings periodically. We just had one here very recently. We'll certainly have another one here in the future. That's one way. The media, like yourself, is another way, as long as they're getting good media information. It's not a scare tactic thing that should be thrown out. We want facts and figures and information, so the residents and the people that even vacation up in this area, it's important to know that people that vacation up in this area, there's no fear of going swimming or fishing or boating or anything else. That's not an issue at all. So people should not be concerned about that. There's a website that the District Health Department number 2 has. It's dhd2.org. And that is available, has a lot of information. We keep up to date with meetings and anything new coming out. Residents can go on that site and keep informed.
Can residents get their wells tested?
Well, yes, and again, that needs to go through the local health department. They can contact us as well as the water program with the reverse osmosis or the water coolers. The Air Force and DEQ have been testing, and requests can be put in for it.
How do residents move forward now?
Well, I would say stay informed, as we were discussing. Keep informed, keep reading, keep looking at the website, attend any future meetings that we have, because the Air Force is there, DEQ's there, Community Health, we're there representing the community. And it's important they be there and ask valid questions that they may have.
Have there been any tests done to evaluate how this might be affecting wildlife?
No, there are not. There have not been.
Okay.
It's been talked about, but there has, at this point, has not been any testing or anything done on wildlife.
What is the health recommended standard for how much PFAS, perfluorinated chemicals, can be in our drinking water?
Well, the EPA came out with a number. It's not a standard, and it's not enforceable. It's just right now a number that they came out with, because, like I say, this is a nationwide situation. It's not just in Oscoda. And it's at 70 parts per trillion, which is a very small number in reality. The fact that you have 69 parts versus 71 parts doesn't make much difference when you're talking at parts per trillion level. But that's the level that it's a working level. It's something as a starting level that the EPA came out with, and that could be adjusted. It could go up, it could go down in the future. We don't know.
In the areas that have tested for having higher levels than that recommended, what are you seeing?
Well, there's only been a couple of wells that have tested 70 or above, and it's just been slightly above. And at least one of those residents were hooked up to municipal water by the Air Force because it did meet the 70 criteria.
Well, thank you so much for talking with us today, Chuck. It really has brought a lot of these issues to light in a way that I think is more understandable and hopefully brings everybody up to date on the issues that we talked about today. We'll continue following this story as it develops, but I just wanted to say thank you again, Chuck, for being here today.
Well, thank you for having me, Teresa, and I hope this helps your viewers understand the situation a little bit better.
Stay tuned. Welcome back. Roughly 2 weeks ago, local, state, and federal agencies came together at a town hall meeting in Oscoda to discuss progress they had made on the issue.
And I can't promise you a swift remedy, but I can promise you that we'll stay connected with conversations and transparency of the information. And I will advocate, because we all deserve safe, quality, clean water.
Bob Delaney, the state's environmental quality specialist, explained the path that perfluorochemicals took to reach and contaminate Oscoda residents' groundwater.
Say up here at the Air Force Base where they use the AFFF, it starts right up here in the soils and it gets down into groundwater, and then it just flows with the groundwater. And so this flow line where the contamination is flowing along here and ends up in your creeks or Van Etten Lake, or on the other side of Van Etten Lake, be that the case. But anyway, if your well happens to be shallow and in that flow line, you're going to get hit with the contamination.
Since the parameters of the contamination are still unclear, many residents are requesting that their individual wells be tested.
You know, people are calling in, they want to have their well sampled, totally understandable. And we haven't had a good way of saying, well, no, you're not anywhere close to being in these plumes. You know, we just go out and sample people's wells.
Since the state would like to be able to tell residents definitively if they are or are not in an affected area, they've decided to allocate some funds into that investigation.
We're taking some of the state's cleanup money and we're going to do an investigation to see how far north that plume is. Because what we want to be able to do is say to people when they call in, yes, you're in the area of concern, or no, you are not in the area of concern. Right now, we can say we don't think you're in the area of concern, but we really can't say definitively. And that's never a great answer if you're worried about your well.
The decision to use these chemicals was not taken lightly. However, it is and remains today the only way to extinguish fires quickly enough to save lives.
One of the important things is to help you realize that the Air Force wasn't using this foolishly, and this was something that was really critical to their mission, and the Navies and the Armies, and at regular airports. But anyway, in 1967, the U.S. Forestville fire was on an aircraft carrier, and the planes and the fuel caught on fire, and they couldn't put it out with the protein foams. It just kept burning and blowing up. And so in the end, 134 sailors died, 161 sailors were injured, and $500 million worth of damage was done. And the Navy realized they had to do something better than that. They couldn't stomach those kind of losses, wanted to protect their soldiers. So they worked with 3M, and they came up with this AFFF.
Agencies that are involved are still working tirelessly on the issue, and they do understand the concern of the residents. However, they do want to remind people being affected by this issue it's not a major threat to their health, but it is something that they would like to correct. That's all we have for today on Insights. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Teresa Lepowski.
Insights into Northeast Michigan is produced by WBKB News. If you have any comments, suggestions, or topics you would like to see on a future show, please email WBKB News. This has been a production of Thunder Bay Broadcasting Corporation. All rights reserved.